360mm water coolers. These would be touted as the flagship all-in-one coolers out there, but me personally, I prefer the 280mm coolers. And when I tested this H115i RGB Platinum, I fell in love with this so much that I went and bought another two for my AMD and Intel test systems. And so I've now got 3 of these in the studio where I like them over the 360mm units quite a bit. And that's mainly because the 140mm fans versus the 120s, I feel like they've got a better ratio there with the airflow versus the noise, in that they pump more air through and they do it so at a lower noise. Plus you've only got 2 fans running versus 3, and naturally 3 fans is going to produce more noise than 2. And also on top of that, I found the temperature differential between the 360 and the 280 wasn't much at all. So straight up, there's my thoughts on 360 versus 280. I currently, up until this point in time, prefer the 280 before going into these tests. But what we've got here is Corsair's new H150i RGB Pro XT. Now they're using 3 120mm ML fans, but they don't carry RGB on the fans themselves, whereas the H115i RGB Platinum, for instance, has both RGB on the block and the fans. This does have RGB on the block, and you can customize that with the IQ software. Though the most important thing is this cooler with a 10900K both out of the box and overclocked going to beat the H115i RGB Platinum? The only way to find out is to, of course, run those tests. But I'm also going to be including the Snowman, which you guys request. Every time I test coolers, you guys ask in the comments, where's the Snowman? So we're putting in the dual fan Snowman here, a $20 cooler, not so practical with a $1,000 setup on the 10900K and an expensive Z490 motherboard. But we're also going to be throwing in Deepcool's flagship as well, which is one of the best air coolers you can get out there on the market. Though with that aside, let the show begin. And here we are with all the testing done, and this one came with a big twist and a big surprise. And that is, first of all, this Snowman, this $20 cooler from AliExpress. It handled the 10900K, and it did so with decent temperatures, 89 degrees. This is the dual fan solution. And the noise on this thing was very well controlled, as you guys probably heard before. But you're probably wondering, why is the Deepcool solution not doing as well? And that's got to do with my motherboard test setup. It just simply had a big chunky heatsink on the VRM. I mean, most Z490 motherboards are going to have big heat sinks on their VRMs. So this is a problem with these massive air coolers. Sometimes you just won't get them to fit properly, and that's what I believe was happening with this cooler. I did test it out in 2 different configurations, 2 different ways. It wouldn't mount the standard way, where you've got it horizontal and air's flowing out the back of your case. It could only mount vertical. But on an open air test bed, it wasn't going to make that much of a difference, but it was still, at the very end of it, it was still lipped up a little bit, and that was causing the temperatures to lose to that of even a Snowman. And so that's the limitation of these big air coolers. You sometimes just can't get around that. So do be careful of that. And that's what I said in my initial review of this big air cooler here. So basically, coming into it, before we even talk about the water coolers, the Snowman gets the A-OK basically across all setups for being a value for money champion. But going over now to the water coolers, this is where, if you want to get that 5.2 gigahertz overclock, you want to get those lower temperatures, lower noise, and you want the bling that this thing's going to offer, then this is where the H115i RGB Platinum beat out the H150i RGB Pro XT. And it did it with a especially out of the box standard thermal solution and noise. It did so great there. And then when we maxed the fan speeds on the 5.2 gigahertz overclock, it matched the temperature levels, but it did so with lower noise. And this is where it comes down to bigger isn't always better. In this case, the 2 140mm fans are doing a great job. Now, perhaps if we tried to go up to 350 watts through these coolers, the 360mm might start edging it out. But as it stands, the 280mm cooler is cheaper, it's got more RGB on the included fans, and it does a better job with noise and temps for most people. At least, I don't imagine too many people taking a 10900K over 5.2 gigahertz for a daily driver. Though as for the air coolers, they just simply couldn't handle this 5.2 gigahertz overclock, and when I tried to do that, I was met with a blue screen on both ends. So this brings out a pretty clear-cut recommendation, and that is the iQOO H150i RGB Pro XT. It's a decent cooler. It's a pretty good cooler. It's going to do everything you want it to, but the fact that the H115i RGB Platinum exists, and I've already tested it and I've run it extensively here at the channel, it's a better buy. It's not only cheaper, as we just said before, it also does everything else better. And that's what my testing here has led to that conclusion. So in terms of the 360mm rad, if you want to go out and get that and you want it for the bigger look, and it's going to maybe match the front of your case perfectly if it supports a 360mm rad, then that's cool. That's an aesthetic thing. But when it comes to actual better coolers, in my opinion, this one gets the win over the H150i RGB Pro XT. And when it comes down to it all, that's about it in terms of both these coolers versus one another. Though I will say one thing, the difference between the H150i Pro XT, I do like the block, how they've used the black aesthetic on the ring, on the outer ring. I think it looks better than the standard silver here that they've used. And so I would like to see them possibly update the Platinum version to have this cool, sleek black ring around the outer edge. That does look really cool, and I do prefer that in terms of aesthetics. But everything else I do prefer on the H115i RGB Platinum. Though with that aside, there's not really a whole lot more to say. If you guys enjoyed today's video, then be sure to hit that like button for us. Let us know in the description below, have you tried the Snowman yet? Have you tried the H115i RGB Platinum? What are your thoughts on air cooling, water cooling? I love reading every single one of your comments in that comment section. Though with that aside, we've got the question of the day here, which comes from Rocket Taurus, and they ask, please help me, Mr. Tech. Yes, City. I bought this CPU Intel Xeon 1231V3, but when I enable hyperthreading in BIOS, it only gives me 2 cores, 4 threads. Why is that? My old CPU was i5-4440. I have updated my BIOS to version 3602. Did I miss something from your videos? So basically, if you've done that upgrade with the CPU, you may wish to reset your BIOS completely, and you should see in the BIOS itself, it should say the core count and thread count. And if it's telling you 4 cores, 8 threads, then the problem exists in your operating system, where beforehand you may have done something to manually limit the threads to 4. So you're gonna have to change that, or maybe possibly if you can't find that setting or change it back, then I'll put a link in the description below for you where you can do that. If nothing else works after that, then you might want to try just a new fresh install of Windows, and that will fix it for you. Hopefully that answers that question, and I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. If you've stayed this far and you're enjoying that content, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and I'll see you next time. Peace out for now. Bye.